Morning, team. I didn't get a chance to give my toast due to circumstances beyond our control, but I wanted to make sure I gave this toast to you because 80 is a pretty important day. You know, I'm 68 years old now, and that's not young. I wake up in the morning, think I fell down a flight of stairs and realize I live in a ranch house, but 80, man, mucho años. You know, I looked it up in the Wikipedia. It said 80 is officially I thought it like silver or gold, but no, 80 is actually the buttload birthday. You have lived a buttload of years, so happy buttload birthday. You know, I was blessed enough in my life to go back to my university and be able to recruit these kids as sophomores, and I trained them and mentored them, and now they're grown men with their own families and presidents of corporations. The one thing I told him, I said, listen, in the end, no one's going to care about your stuff. No one's going to give a shit what kind of car you drove or how much money you had. All they're going to remember you for is two things. One, the stories you can tell. Two, the stories you were in. Now, if you love a good story, this is your family. Now, I go by three names. One, Randall. My mom calls me when I'm probably not in great favor. Randy, most of my friends know me by. And the third, which I was anointed at I think it was the Great Mexican Flood birthday party down in Mexico. Jack was 90. I think Teen was like 27, something like that. Anyway, that night, that day, the grand event, Queen Teen anointed me her bastard son. Yeah, her bastard son. Like Jack Snow, Jon Snow in Game of Thrones, you know, I take honor to being that bastard son of this clan. I mean, you know, let's face it, Game of Thrones, Dynasty, Dallas, a little bit of Hee Haw, and maybe Beverly Hillbillies and Survivor. That's this family. Now, I like to tell a good story, and I like to tell the story the first time I met Teen because it profoundly changed my life. That one day, I'll never be the same. I've never been the same. In fact, that day alone set me on the path that I am today. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was back in the 80s. Now, I was dating this young lady, Penny, beautiful young lady. We had dated for almost a decade, and everybody knew that we were going to get married. In fact, Cher and Keith asked me and her to be Megan's godparents. That's why Megan calls me almost godfather. Well, I first met this family through Doylene, who was Penny's sweet mate in college. And then they moved off campus and moved into a duplex, and Keith and Cher lived on the other side. So we played like we were married couples and hung out with them. They had moved out to San Marcos, probably 1980 something, moved out to San Marcos. And I remember sitting in the living room, and I believe Cher had pregnant with Allison and had Megan sitting on her stomach. And I heard this. And Cher just kind of calmly looks up to Keith and goes, I think that's Mom. Yeah, Mom's here. I went, what? Yeah, that's Teen, my mom. And then all of a sudden this helicopter flies in the backyard. It's like someone pulling up with a pickup truck, no big deal. So right then I was interested. Man, you know, you had me at a hello. But that airplane, helicopter dropped down and the door opened up and this professional man came out, pilot. I assumed he was the pilot. When he put down the stairs, I saw these legs walk out of this thing. I went, oh my God, and it was attached to this ass. Oh my God, and then, ooh, gorgeous little blonde. I said, man, I didn't know Doylene and Cher had a hot sister. But then about that time, a distinguished, slightly older gentleman stepped out of the helicopter. They grabbed hands, and I knew at that moment, that must be Jack. Now, true, in my life, it like the younger vintage for years, and I sat Jack down and I picked his brain. And we sat in hours and hours, and that day, between Jack's conversation and Teen's legs and Cher and Keith hanging out, it changed my life. You know, Jack told me, he says, son, you know, it doesn't matter age, it doesn't matter religion, education. He said, true intellectual and emotional compatibility is at very least difficult, if not impossible, to come by. So sometimes, even though Ford is to Chevy, what Dodge is to Chrysler, what Post Oates are to cornflakes, what the clear blue sky might be to the deep blue sea, what Hank Williams is to Neil Armstrong and George Strait is to swing music. Sometimes you just know, even though you're made for each other, you have to opt for the more temporal gratification of sheer physical attraction. And at that moment, I realized that did not make Jack a shallow person. That made Jack my mentor. So between that conversation, Teen's legs, and sharecropping kids like a sharecropper in the 30s, I was scared straight. My girlfriend thought that was Love is Blind, but I thought it was more like Scared Straight or Survivor. And I stayed single for about 40 years because of that day. Now you can ask my wife, if you get a chance, how fun that is to be married to a man that's been single. You know, behind every great clan is a leader. And it's usually not the king on the throne, it's the queen behind the doors, behind the wizard behind the window. You know, I was blessed at corporate. I did the keynote speech for the brand new sales manager meeting every year. And I think about that story when I think about Teen, because it shows you what a real leader does. It's called The Chauffeur and Professor by Jerry Clark. If I can, I want to finish with this speech. The Independence Oil Company of America had their big meeting down in Houston, Texas. Man, they hired this fella from the Midwest to come give a speech. Ooh, man, he forevermore gave a speech. Man, it's so inflamed and enthused those oil people. They held an executive meeting and said, listen, we got to hire that fella. Let's get him a limousine and a chauffeur. We'll drive around the country making that same speech, wherever we can gather up a crowd. And they did. Now, 6 months gone by, driving down a 4-lane highway. The professor in the back seat with a briefcase in his lap, the chauffeur driving the car with his little blue serge suit and chauffeur's cap on. He said, Professor? I said, yes. Ain't no fairness in this world. I said, my dear man, why would you say such a thing? Well, I've done listening to make that speech now for 6 months. I memorized it. I give the cotton speech better than you can. And I'm broke, and here you are getting rich. Well, I have you know I graduated. I don't care you got all them things. I'm a better speech maker than you. That's all there is to it. You know, I'm about your size. They ain't never seen me. You pull over the next chance you get. I'll put your little suit on, drive the car, and you can go up there and make a fool of yourself. I'll keep you from sucking eggs, so that just suits me fine. Picture this. 22,000, standing room only, in the field house. Come see the professor who graduated from the great school of mine speak. Man, and as they're pulling him up to the podium, the real professor in the back row with his chauffeur's uniform and his cap in his lap just peeping at him. And man, did he give a speech? Woo! Shucked it right on down to the car. Man, people throwing their books in the air, going crazy. And when they finally got ordered restored, said, in fact, we got about 5 minutes before the bell rings. Would you like to ask a question? Well, you know the type. Got books under both arms, pockets and pens in his pocket, short sleeve shirt, big old rimmed glasses. Professor, if a dinosaur which roamed the earth some billion years ago died, and his carcass was covered layer after layer after layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and a drill bit on a wildcat venture drilled to 7,532 feet, what would be the name of the stratosphere and the pH level of the drill bit? Man, you could have heard a pin drop. Mr. Student, all the years I've been speaking, that's got to be the most simplest question I've ever been asked. In fact, I can't believe they let a man don't know more than you in a fine university like this. To show you how simple a question that is, my chauffeur's on the back row. I'll ask you to stand up and answer it. Teen is that chauffeur on the back row, the wizard behind the curtain, the queen on the throne, the mother with a child in her arms. Always there for us, always there for me. Whenever I needed that chauffeur on the back row, you provided either yourself or your family to me, which changed my life every day and continues to change my life. I love you so much. Happy birthday, happy buttload birthday. I love you so much.